Millionaire rushes child to hospital days later. The shocking truth changes everything forever. The siren screamed through the night, a heart-pounding wail that echoed down the empty streets. A sleek black SUV tore through the darkness, its headlights cutting a path like a beacon of desperation. Inside, billionaire Richard Hargrove gripped the steering wheel, knuckles white as panic clawed at his chest. His daughter lay in the back seat, small and still, her once bright smile now a flickering memory. Blood soaked through the bandages on her head, each drop whispering fears he couldn't bear to voice. The hospital loomed ahead, its fluorescent lights bathing the vehicle in an unholy glow, illuminating the frozen expression on Richard's face. How could this happen? Only hours earlier, she'd been playing at a birthday party, laughter spilling like sunshine around her. But then, a terrible scream shattered the joy. A child had fallen from the swing. An innocent game turned tragic. Richard's heart raced as he recalled the moment, when he realized his daughter had sprinted toward the chaos, only to get caught in the crossfire of panic. The echo of voices haunted him, parents gasping, children crying, the air thick with fear. In that moment, he knew rich or poor, it didn't matter. This was a gut-wrenching crawl through every parent's nightmare. He felt the weight of the world pressing down, a tightness in his throat that threatened to choke him. Time stretched like taffy, and he couldn't escape the feeling that someone, or something, was watching. The hospital doors loomed and Richard couldn't shake the idea that this tragedy was only the beginning. His gut twisted as he saw the chaos unfolding inside. Nurses dashed around like frantic fireflies, their faces masks of determination. Doctors barked orders, a whirlwind of confusion intersecting with purpose. But amid the chaos, Richard noticed something strange. A figure lurked in the shadows, someone dressed in black, concealed beneath the harsh lights. Just as Richard's heart sank further, a voice jumped in the air, "That girl. We need to find her." Everyone turned, eyes wide with suspicion. Who was this mysterious person? Why did they care? His heart raced, heavy with dread and incredulity. Hey, before we continue with this amazing story, I need to give you an important heads up. Many subscribers have reported that YouTube unsubscribed them without warning. Take a quick second to check the red button below to make sure you're still subscribed to the channel. I'd hate for you to miss any of the exclusive content coming soon. And while you're there, smash that like button, it really helps me out with the algorithm. Oh, and tell me in the comments, which city are you watching from? I love getting to know every amazing person who's part of this community. Your participation makes all the difference. Let's connect. Richard's thoughts spiraled as seconds ticked by like hours. If he didn't get answers soon, he might lose everything. The doctor arrived, eyes as grim as storm clouds, and whispered words that struck his heart like a thunderclap. There was no time for pleasantries, just facts. His daughter was in critical condition, and they were hunting for information to save her life. Fingers trembling, Richard could almost feel a shadow creeping closer. What dark secrets hovered just beyond the sterile walls? Did the figure in black hold the key to unraveling this nightmare, or was it just another layer of horror added to an already unbearable fate? As he paced under the bright lights, a chilling realization slipped into his mind. Perhaps this was not an accident at all. Richard's heart raced as he searched for the shadowy figure. Who were they? What did they know? His breaths came in quick, shallow gasps as he pushed through the crowd, each clamor of voices threatening to drown him. He locked onto a glimpse of black fabrics slipping behind a doorway, and adrenaline propelled him forward. The corridor was sterile and cold, fluorescent lights buzzing above him like angry bees. Panic surged, fighting the instinct to run back to his daughter. But this person might hold the answers he desperately needed. "Wait!" he shouted, lunging toward the door. He burst through, and the air hit him like a wall, thick with antiseptic and something else, fear. The figure turned sharply, revealing a young woman, her eyes wide and filled with an intensity that made Richard's stomach twist. She didn't belong here, not in a hospital, not in this chaos. "Who are you?" he demanded, his voice trembling but firm. "What do you know about my daughter?" She glanced nervously over her shoulder, as if she expected someone to come after her. "I'm trying to help," she whispered, I know what happened. You need to listen to me. Help? How can you help? She's in there fighting for her life, he said, gesturing back to the chaotic emergency room. You weren't even at the party. I was close, she insisted, stepping into his space, urgency radiating from her. I saw the whole thing. It wasn't just an accident. Someone pushed her. The words struck Richard like a physical blow. What are you talking about? How could anyone do that? I need you to trust me, she said, her eyes darting again. I overheard something, plans to hurt kids at that party. I thought it was just kids being kids, but then I saw it was more. It was a setup. Richard felt the blood drain from his face. A chill crawled up his spine. This is insane. You must be mistaken. No! She cried, a flare of desperation igniting her voice. I've seen the same figure lurking around before. They're dangerous. If you don't act, it could be too late for your daughter, and others. Show me, he demanded, an edge of desperation now lining his words. What do you know? Before she could respond, a flurry of footsteps echoed down the hall. Nurses shuffled hurriedly and a doctor rushed past with a grave expression. The woman clutched his arm, panic gripping her. We have to get out of here. They can't know I talked to you, please. Richard wavered, torn between following this stranger and rushing back to his daughter, but the gravity of her claim pinned him. If what she said was true, then returning to the chaos was no longer an option. Okay, let us go, he decided, his heart thumping wildly against his chest as they slipped out of the hospital. They hurried to a maintenance exit, the fluorescent lights in the corridor flickering ominously above them. Where are we going? Richard asked, adrenaline coursing through him, mixing with fear. Just trust me, we need to stay ahead of them, she urged, her urgency pushing him to follow. Outside, the cool night air washed over Richard, but the sense of safety would not come. Shadows were everywhere, and he could feel eyes watching him, assessing him from the darkness. He followed the woman around the building, desperate to understand but equally terrified of what they might find. Suddenly she stopped short, her hand gripping his. Listen, there's something else. You have to know. Before she could continue, a sharp scream pierced the night, bouncing through the parking lot and chilling Richard to the bone. It was too close, too real, sparking a deep instinctual dread inside him. What was that? He gasped, his heart racing anew. The woman looked at him, her face pale. We're not alone. We have to move now. But deep down, Richard couldn't shake the feeling that the real horror was only beginning. They sprinted across the empty lot, the echo of the woman's grip, now tighter, burning into Richard's arm. The scream still hung in the air, twisting like a knife. Panic flared in his chest, but he pushed it down. He had to focus. Where's the car? He said, scanning the shadows for anything that seemed normal, for something familiar in this surreal nightmare. Over here, she urged, dashing toward an older sedan parking next to a flickering streetlight. Richard jumped in and slammed the door, the metal clang an anchor in the chaos. The woman slid into the driver's seat, her hands trembling on the wheel. He could see the fear clinging to her, but there was something else. Determination. Start the car, he barked, his heart drumming like a tribal beat. I'm trying, she exclaimed, fiddling with the keys. They rattled nervously in the ignition, a sound that made Richard's skin crawl. It's an old piece of junk. He plunged his hands into his own pockets, searching for his cell phone. The battery was dead. Pure panic coursed through him. They needed to call for help. Please, we can't do this on our own. I know, just hold on. Finally, the engine sputtered to life. As she stepped on the accelerator, Richard glanced out the rear window. His breath caught. Two dark figures emerged from the hospital entrance, rushing toward them, their faces shrouded in shadows. Go! Go! He shouted, his voice rough with urgency. The woman's foot pressed hard on the gas, and the car lurched forward. As they tore away from the hospital parking lot, Richard's heart bashed against his ribs, chaotic like the soundtrack of a horror movie. Do you know where we should go? She asked, eyes darting. No, just drive. His mind raced. It felt like they were racing into an abyss, one that had no markers, no escape. I can't go back to my place. They've been watching me, she said, steering sharply to the left. We need to find a safe space, somewhere we can figure this out. Richard gripped the seat, his frustration spilling over. How do you even know I can trust you? I've risked everything to warn you. Her voice rose, desperation mixing with determination. We're running out of time. A flash of headlights flickered behind them, and Richard swiveled in his seat. I think they're following us. She turned sharply onto a side road, the tires screeching in protest. The car struggled for traction, veering dangerously close to the curb. Hold on. I'll lose them. But in the dark, it felt as if they were losing more than just their pursuers. They were losing control of their lives. Where did you hear those things about the party? He asked, trying to anchor his spiraling thoughts. I have friends, she said, her focus split between the road and Richard's anxious gaze. They saw someone slipping out of the crowd before the incident, someone who didn't belong there. I don't care about them. I care about my daughter. The truth hit him like a punch, cold and hard. What if something happens to her? What if she has stop? She nearly screamed, her voice cutting through the anguish. You need to think. If we don't find the truth, there could be more victims. Not just your daughter. The weight of her words crashed around him. What if she was right? Suddenly, a loud thud reverberated from behind, and a shudder traveled through the car. What was that? Someone had hit their rear bumper. The woman cursed under her breath, her hands tightening on the wheel. We have to get off this road. I know a place. Where? He pressed, but then saw a flash out of the corner of his eye. Another vehicle. Fast. Coming straight for them. Get down! He yelled, throwing himself against the car door as gunfire erupted. The bullets ricocheted like a symphony of shattering glass, and Richard's world shattered with it. As the chaos took hold, all he could think was, had they stepped deeper into a trap far worse than they ever imagined? Hold on tight, she shouted, veering off the main road just as more shots rang out. They flew into a dimly lit forest path, branches whipping against the windshield like angry hands trying to pull them back to danger. Richard's heart thundered in his chest. Just tell me it's safe, he cried, desperation clawing at him. Trust me, she replied, but Richard could hear the tremor in her voice. Out in the darkness, danger loomed ever closer. And with every turn, Richard feared he was running out of time. The woman weaved through the trees, cold sweat glistening on her forehead as she fought to keep control. The car rattled over uneven ground, and Richard could barely catch his breath, his mind racing with thoughts of his daughter. What's ahead? He gasped, fighting back the fear that threatened to suffocate him. Just a cabin, it's abandoned, but it has a basement, she replied, her voice a tense whisper as she skidded to a stop. Maybe we can hide there until we figure out who's after us. Richard nodded, but a chill ran down his spine. He couldn't shake the feeling that they were walking right into another trap. Are you sure? We don't have a choice, she insisted, unbuckling her seatbelt. Taking a deep breath, he flashed her a look. Let us go. They jumped out, the chill of the night biting at their skin. He followed her at a hurried pace, heart pounding hard as they dashed through the thick brush, branches clawing at them like phantom fingers. The dim light from the moon barely cut through the canopy above, engulfing them in shadows. The cabin loomed ahead, rotting and crooked, as if it had been abandoned for decades. An aura of dread hung around it. The woman hesitated before the door, looking back at him. Stay alert. Yeah, I'm always alert, Richard muttered, the sarcasm a poor cover for his anxiety. The door creaked on its hinges as she pushed it open, exposing a dark interior. He stepped inside, the damp air thick and stale, filled with the scent of mildew. Check for windows, she urged, moving deeper into the cabin, scanning for anything that could serve as a means of escape. Richard moved cautiously, careful not to make a sound. The floorboards creaked beneath his weight, echoing through the empty space. He could feel the weight of unseen eyes pressing down on him, the panic returning in waves. He found a window and peered out. The dark woods stood silent, the only sound the rustling of leaves in the wind. "I don't see anything," he called, the disappointment twisting in his gut. "Great, maybe we'll finally have a moment to," but her words were cut short by a crashing sound outside. What was that? Richard's heart raced. "I don't know." She rushed to his side, both of them breathless, staring out into the embrace of the forest. The shadows danced sinisterly, the feeling of danger creeping ever closer. Then, through the trees, a flashlight beam cut through the darkness, sweeping the ground with relentless precision. "They're here." Her voice trembled, fear washing over her face. Richard's mind raced. "We need to find the basement." They hurried through the cabin, but the layout was as confusing as the situation itself. He pushed a door open, revealing a steep staircase leading down. "Come on," he urged, gripping her arm as they descended into the dark. The basement was colder stone walls dripping with moisture. It felt like an ancient tomb, waking only to hold them captive. Richard glanced back up the stairs. "What if they find us?" "Stop thinking like that," she snapped, fear morphing to irritation. "We need to prepare ourselves. We can't let them catch us unawares." He nodded, but the pit in his stomach deepened. "Do you really think hiding here will keep us safe?" "I have to believe it will." The weak flicker of her phone light illuminated the small space, bouncing off the damp walls, but then the light suddenly faded, leaving them in complete darkness. "Damn it!" she muttered, cursing. Richard let out a heavy breath, panic clawing at the edges of his resolve. But even in the silence that followed, they could hear it, a slow, deliberate sound, like footsteps crunching leaves, resolute and approaching hide. He hissed as they ducked down behind a stack of wooden crates. Richard's heart raced, the shadows deepening around them as the footsteps drew nearer. Was it too late? Had they run straight into the jaws of their greatest fear? Then a voice drifted down the stairs, low and chilling. "Do you think it's over? You underestimated us." Richard's blood ran cold. Who was this person, and how did they know them? The cabin closed in around him, the darkness suffocating. And as dread took root in the pit of his stomach, he realized they were trapped, and he might never see his daughter again. The door creaked open and from the shadows emerged a figure, silhouette almost too familiar. Richard's heart stopped. Was this the face of salvation, or the harbinger of their doom? As the figure stepped into the light, Richard would discover a shocking truth that could change everything. The figure stepped into the dim light, and Richard's breath caught in his throat. It was a man he recognized, their family lawyer, Jonathan. The relief that washed over him quickly twisted into confusion. Why was he here? What was he doing in a dark cabin in the middle of nowhere, just when their lives were hanging by a thread? "Jonathan?" Richard rasped, his voice hoarse with disbelief. "What are you doing here?" Jonathan's expression remained unreadable, his eyes scanning the basement as if weighing their surroundings. "We don't have much time. They're closer than you think." "Who is?" the woman asked, her voice barely masking her panic. Before Jonathan could answer, the sound of heavy boots thudding against the wooden floor above made Richard's pulse quicken. He glanced at the staircase. Each step echoed menacingly, a countdown to their doom. "We need to move," Jonathan urged, making his way toward the far corner of the damp space. "This basement has a hidden exit. Follow me." "Hidden? How did you know?" Richard's mind raced with questions. The lawyer haltingly turned. "There are secrets buried within your family's past that are more dangerous than you realize." His words hung in the damp air like a lingering ghost, and Richard's stomach churned. He had trusted Jonathan all these years, but now doubts gnawed at him. Was Jonathan even here to help them, or was he part of the peril that had entrapped them? "Show us the way," the woman snapped, urgency flaring in her voice. Jonathan hesitated for a heartbeat. "If we go this route, there's no turning back. Once we leave, the truth will come crashing in. Are you ready to face it?" Richard exchanged glances with the woman, her eyes wide with uncertainty. "What choice do we have?" he said reluctantly, desperation edging his thoughts. Then come, Jonathan said, stepping into the shadows of the basement. They followed, the air growing colder around them as they ventured deeper into the unknown. The steps were uneven. Richard's heartbeat echoed loudly in his ears. Dread twisted in his gut. Every time he thought they had escaped one threat, another loomed larger. Jonathan stopped by a section of stone wall, tapping a subtle rhythm that seemed almost rhythmic. With a low rumble, a section of the wall shifted, revealing a narrow passageway. Quickly! Jonathan insisted, nudging them forward. Richard hesitated, the scent of mildew and dampness intensifying. What lies ahead? Where are we going? To safety and answers, Jonathan replied, his tone more serious than ever. As they squeezed through the opening, Richard couldn't shake the feeling that stepping through would take them far from safety. He had always believed knowledge was power, but now it felt like it might lead to their destruction. The passage twisted and turned, and Richard's nerves flared. The walls closed in, and his heart raced. They walked in silence, the only sound their footsteps echoing against the wet stone. Finally, the passage ended in what appeared to be an underground garage of sorts, with one flickering overhead light barely illuminating the space. A car stood parked inside, dusty and weather-beaten. Get in, Jonathan ordered as he moved to the driver's side. Where are we headed? Richard asked, feeling the weight of panic creeping back. Where the hunt began, Jonathan replied cryptically, his eyes suddenly cold and distant. The woman shot Richard a worried look, her breath quickening. Let us just go. We can figure it out on the road. All right, Richard conceded, adrenaline forcing him to act. They climbed into the cramped back seat, tension hanging thick in the air. But just as Jonathan started the engine, the basement door flew open above, bathed in bright light. Voices called out, rough and threatening, shattering the moment of fragile safety they had felt. Go! Richard yelled, panic surging through him as he felt their pursuers closing in. As Jonathan slammed on the gas and the car lurched forward, Richard's thoughts raced. Had they truly left danger behind, or had they merely driven deeper into a web of secrets that could unravel their lives forever? The road ahead twisted into darkness, but Richard couldn't shake the ominous feeling that the worst was yet to come. With a heavy heart, he realized he was hurtling towards a confrontation that might reveal truths he was never prepared to face, one that could alter the course of their lives in ways unimaginable. What shocking revelations awaited them just beyond the boundaries of the dark forest? The car squealed around a sharp bend, the headlights barely piercing the thick darkness that enveloped the forest. Richard's heart raced as the trees seemed to close in around them, shadows twisting into grotesque shapes that mirrored the turmoil in his mind. Each jolt of the car echoed the urgency within him. Faster! Richard urged as Jonathan gripped the steering wheel, the tension coiling tighter among them. The woman beside him, still unnamed, took a deep, shaky breath, as if steeling herself for something that might be unleashed. Stay calm, both of you, Jonathan commanded, his tone a blend of fear and authority. There's a lot riding on this. If we make it through, we need to make it first. Richard cut in, disbelief slicing through his anxiety. What do you mean by the hunt? Jonathan's hands tightened. It's not just about you, Richard. This involves forces, powerful people who will stop at nothing to bury the truth. Sometimes the past doesn't stay buried. The woman's eyes darted from Richard to Jonathan. Leave the cryptic talk for later. Right now, I just want to live. Richard felt the weight of her words. He wanted that too. The dense woods around them held secrets, and even the passing trees felt like witnesses to their unfolding fate. But no matter how fast Jonathan pressed the accelerator, he could hear the sound of engines revving behind them, dark, powerful cars just waiting for the moment. They were being hunted, and each kilometer brought a fresh wave of adrenaline crashing over him. He risked a glance in the rearview mirror and saw the glowing lights of their pursuers drawing closer. His chest tightened as something sharp clawed at his throat, fear transforming into a blinding urgency. They're coming! He shouted. We can't let them catch us! Jonathan swerved the vehicle to the left, bounding over a rough patch of road. We're nearly there. Just hold on. What's the plan? Richard pressed, his thoughts racing faster than the car itself. Are we heading to safety or straight into a trap? Jonathan's expression darkened, the familiar facade of the trustworthy lawyer crumbling. If we make it to the estate, we can control the narrative. We have to expose what they're doing, what happened with your family. Just then, a flash of bright headlights burst through the trees, illuminating a figure in the road ahead. Richard's gut twisted, heart hammering against his ribs. Jonathan! He shouted, panic exploding in his voice. Watch out! Before Jonathan could react, the car slammed into the figure. Time slowed, the world outside shattering into chaos. Richard braced himself, the impact jarring like a punch to the gut. The car skidded to a halt, tires screeching. Silence enveloped them, stretching awkwardly after the calamity. Then, as adrenaline ebbed, a low groan came from the front. Get out! Richard barked, his body already moving before the urge to help fully registered. Jonathan opened his door, his face pale, an uncharacteristic fear flickering in his eyes. They rushed to the front, finding a man sprawled across the asphalt, blood pooling around him. Why did you stop? The man gasped, pain etched on his features. You shouldn't have come here. Richard's heart dropped. Who was this man? And why did it feel like everything was spiraling out of control? Before he could voice his thoughts, the sound of engines roared back to life in the distance, growing ever closer. Get him in the car! Jonathan ordered, urgency ringing through his voice. We're not done yet! Richard hesitated, dread gnawing at him. The truth was unraveling, and they were knee-deep in danger. With the light waning and shadows creeping in, the sense of hunted desperation blanketed them. Richard couldn't shake the feeling that one revelation connected to another, all leading to something terrifyingly close. What secrets did this stranger hold that could either save them or doom them all? Richard crouched next to the injured man, heart pounding, trying to assess the situation. He glanced at Jonathan, whose demeanor had shifted from anxious to frantic. The presence of danger was palpable, thick like the musty scent of the forest. Help me! The man gasped, his voice a mere whisper. Richard could see the pain etched into his features, the blood pooling beneath him dark and foreboding. We can't just leave him here. Jonathan shot back, his voice tinged with desperation. It was a moral dilemma that sent chills shooting down Richard's spine. Are you nuts? Richard exclaimed, glancing toward the road. The distant roar of engines was growing louder, the hunt was very much on. We'll get caught. The man groaned, shifting slightly. They'll kill you all if they find you. How do you know? Jonathan asked, desperately eyeing the shadows creeping closer. I know things about your family, the stranger breathed, his eyes fluttering. Things you don't want to hear. Richard's heart raced with fear and suspicion. What could this man possibly know? Before he could question further, the sound of tires crunching on gravel echoed in the distance. They had minimal time. Okay, Richard shouted. We'll get you in the car, but you have to help us. He shot a glance toward Jonathan. You grab his arms. I'll get his legs. With hurried, shaky hands, they hoisted the wounded man into the back seat. He groaned in pain, but the ticking clock of their doom only pushed them forward. The moment they were all inside, Jonathan slammed the doors shut and threw the car into gear. Richard twisted around, his gaze snapping back toward the forest path they'd come from. The headlights of their pursuers broke through the trees like mocking eyes. Where to? Jonathan asked, his grip on the steering wheel white-knuckled. Just go. We need to find a way out of here. Richard urged, adrenaline coursing through his veins. The car surged forward, tires kicking up dirt. The road blurred into a dark tunnel of uncertain escape. Richard stole glances at the rearview mirror, his heart hammering as he saw the monstrous headlights drawing closer. Deeper into the woods they sped, but a growing feeling of dread pulled at him. The man's words echoed in his mind. What did he know? What could he reveal that would change everything? Who were they? Richard finally asked, eyes piercing into the man lying against the leather seats. What do they want? Through clenched teeth, the man murmured, "The truth about the estate. Your family, it's all connected." "Connected how?" Jonathan yelled, impatience spilling over. He barely heard the man's reply, lost in the rising tension. The car jolted through a pothole, lurching violently, but Richard fought to focus. Just as they rounded another bend, the headlights from behind were suddenly blotted out as a tree branch whipped against the rear window. "Damn it!" Jonathan cursed, fighting the wheel. "I need to know, what do we do next?" "Just look for a place to hide. We can't let them see us," Richard shouted, but it felt futile. Their pursuers were relentless. The man shifted, groaning in pain, but he locked eyes with Richard, grip tightening on the fabric of the seat. "Trust me, I know how to stop them, but it means revealing everything." "Stop who?" Richard pressed, fear bleeding into every fiber of his being. "What is it?" The man's breath hitched, eyes glazing over. "The files, the truth is," before he could finish, a piercing crash filled the air, sending shards of glass flying. They were ambushed, the fragmented echoes of the night breaking into screams. "Get down!" Jonathan shouted, and everything from then on rushed past in a blur of chaos, fear, and pain. Richard's mind raced with questions, but all he could do was brace for what came next. As they staggered into the unknown, one truth became clear: the wild, terrifying nature of the hunt was just beginning. What dangerous secrets were waiting to be uncovered, and would the next turn in the dark lead them to freedom or deeper into a nightmare? Jonathan's heart drummed in his chest as he wrenched the steering wheel, fighting to keep the car on the road. The impact from the crash had sent a shockwave through him, but adrenaline drowned out everything but the need to escape. They were trapped in a nightmare, the injured man gasping in the back seat, his grim warnings echoing ominously in Richard's ears. "Keep driving!" Richard shouted, glancing at Jonathan's face, which was pale and set like granite. "They won't stop until they capture us." "What do we do if we run into them?" Jonathan's voice wavered, showing cracks in his bravado. They barreled through the dark, shadows flickering past like specters. Jonathan's mind raced. It was hard to stay focused when every rustle of the wind sounded like footsteps of the hunters. "Just keep moving!" Richard yelled, fingers trembling as he gripped the door handle, torn between trusting the wounded man and feeling the weight of his own family's secrets. He said, "There's a way to stop them. We have to make it to safety first." As they sped deeper into the forest, the car jolted again, sending Richard's insides twisting. The headlights of their pursuers glinted in the rearview, relentless shadows that threatened to swallow them whole. The trees loomed ominously, branches like skeletal fingers clawing at the fleeting glow of their headlights. The wounded man moaned, every shake of the vehicle eliciting pained gasps. Richard twisted around, looking for a sign of reassurance. "Stay with us," he pleaded, anguish flooding through him. "What do we need to know?" But the man's eyes fluttered dangerously, as if he were fighting against the tide pulling him from consciousness. "The files, they're hidden," he whispered, trailing off as he slumped against the seat. "Files?" Jonathan echoed, breathless. "What files?" Richard leaned closer, straining to hear. The estate in the cellar, everything. A sudden flash lit up the forest behind them. Headlights? No, it couldn't be. Jonathan's hands shook, and Richard could feel his resolve starting to crack. "Can't you drive faster?" he urged. "Every second counts." Rain began to fall, splattering against the windshield like bowing voices. A choking fog rolled in, twisting around the trees, obscuring their path. "I can't see!" Jonathan shouted, panic lacing his voice. The car swerved violently. Richard felt the tires slip, the world tilting sideways, and then a powerful lurch. They were stuck. The vehicle shuddered, wheels clawing at the slick mud but going nowhere. Jonathan's breaths came in ragged gasps as he slammed on the brakes. "Get us out!" Richard yelled, adrenaline lighting a fire in his veins. He clutched the seat, heart racing as the reality of their situation crashed down. "We can't be found here!" The wounded man's eyes fluttered awake. "You don't understand," he rasped, "they can track you." His voice faded into a feeble whisper. We need to move now. It's too late. They'll find us. Jonathan's voice cracked, wild as desperation clawed at him. What do we do? Richard felt trapped, both in the car and in the web of family secrets that threatened to suffocate him. You heard him. We have to get to the estate. The cellar, but before he could finish, the oppressive sounds of engines revving echoed in the night air, sending jolts of fear through both men. The pursuers were upon them, cutting through the trees like wolves on a hunt. Run! Richard shouted, throwing open the door. The rain poured, a torrential downpour that blurred everything ahead. They couldn't stay. We need to get to the house. We can't let them drag us back. But when Richard looked back, the space was empty. The man was gone, vanishing into the darkness, leaving only a whisper of uncertainty and the weight of secrets hanging heavy in the air. What is happening? Jonathan shouted, disbelief twisting his features. Don't you see? He is leading us somewhere, Richard gasped, scanning the shadows. Somewhere we can end this. As they ran into the night, their hearts pounding frantically, Richard couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched at the twisted web of their family's past was tightening around them, ready to ensnare them back into its dark heart. What awaited them in the depths of the family estate? Would they find the truth or face their doom at the hands of those who haunted their strides? The forest felt alive, every rustle of branches echoing the pounding of their hearts. Richard pushed forward, pulling Jonathan through the slick mud and relentless rain. Each step sent icy chills racing up his spine. They could hear the engines rumble closer, the low growl of the pursuers cutting through the thick mist. Over there! Jonathan shouted, pointing at a faint glow peeking through the trees. It's the house. We can't let them get to us. Richard's breath came out in shallow gasps as they sprinted toward the flickering light, hope igniting a spark amid the suffocating fear. He felt the damp soil sucking at his shoes, every step an uphill battle. Keep moving, he urged, with every ounce of will he could muster. As they broke through the last row of trees, the silhouette of the estate loomed ahead, a shadowy figure against the stormy sky. The walls seemed to box them in, both a sanctuary and a prison, steeped in secrets that whispered through its cracked windows. Let us go! Richard yelled, lunging toward the entrance. The air was heavy inside, stinging with dampness and a touch of something else. Was that the scent of old books or something darker? He pulled the door open, the creak echoing like a haunting melody in the silence. Together they stumbled inside, slamming the door behind them. The flashlight beams from the dining room illuminated their faces, casting long shadows over the dusty furniture, remnants of a life that felt light years away. Jonathan leaned against the wall, breathless, his fingers trembling as he pointed the light around the room. Where do we start? Down in the cellar. Richard remembered the man's words, a cold thrill of urgency threading through him. We need to find those files. But as they moved toward the stairway leading down, a sudden crash echoed from outside. The doors shuddered violently, splintering under the force of something or someone trying to break in. Jonathan's eyes widened in terror. They found us! Quick, the cellar! Richard shouted, urging him down the stairs as the door splintered again. Darkness enveloped them as they descended, the air growing colder. They stumbled over debris and reached the bottom only for Jonathan to stop short. What if it's locked? What if it's not there? Then we find another way, Richard replied, his mind racing. The urgency was palpable, and he felt the fear creeping into his chest like an unwelcome guest. Help me look! The dim light barely illuminated the room, revealing shelves lined with everything from ancient tools to dust-covered boxes. Richard's heart sank as he scanned the room for something, anything that could cut through the rising dread. The sound of clattering metal made both of them jump. Jonathan! Richard whispered, turning toward the sound. A heavy footfall echoed above them, and Richard felt the breath catch in his throat. They were close. So close. Look, Jonathan said, pointing to a sturdy wooden chest. What if it's in there? Trembling hands fumbled with the latch. The chest sprang open, revealing faded documents and photographs, sepia-toned memories of family gatherings long forgotten. Richard's heart raced as he sifted through them, recognition flaring with every name he read. Then a photograph caught his eye, his father standing with men cloaked in darkness, a sinister smile threatening to pull at the corners of their mouths. Richard. Jonathan's voice trailed off, a knowing tone that sent icy fingers creeping down Richard's spine. The door above them crashed open, and he could hear voices shouting, searching. "Richards!" one voice yelled, and his name felt like a shackle, pulling him back to a night he couldn't escape. Richard slammed the chest shut, panic tightening his chest as he whispered, "We have to hide." They ducked behind the shelves, the wood slick beneath their fingers as they held their breath, hearts pounding in unison, the darkness pressing around them. But what awaited them in that cluttered cellar? Would they finally uncover the truth, or had they walked straight into the jaws of their family's past? The heavy footsteps echoed through the cellar, sending a chill down Richard's spine. He held his breath, hidden behind the rickety shelves, heart pounding in his ears. Each crash above them reverberated like a death knell, the sound of pursuers hunting them through the familiar territory of his family's haunted estate. As the voices grew closer, Richard felt his grip tighten on Jonathan's arm. "What do we do?" Jonathan whispered, voice barely above a trembling breath. The fear radiating off him was palpable. Richard wished he had answers, but the weight of their choices pressed down like a heavy stone. Suddenly, a voice rang out, a familiar voice that made Richard's stomach turn. "Check down there. I saw them come in." It was Derek, his father's trusted aide. A traitor. The betrayal came crashing into him like a tidal wave, forcing the remnants of his trust to crumble. "Richard," Jonathan said, panic lacing his tone. "We can't stay here." "I know," Richard muttered, mentally scrambling through his options. Memories of the photographs flashed through his mind, the smiling faces standing next to men with shadowy intentions. "The files, the answers are in the chest," he whispered urgently to Jonathan, who looked back at him, uncertainty written all over his face. "Just a little longer," Richard said, listening intently to the footsteps above. As Derek's voice faded momentarily, the basement grew tortuously silent, only the sound of Richard's racing heart filling the void. Would they pass by? Would they slip away into safety, or had they wandered into their final chapter? "We need to make a choice," Richard finally said, forcefully keeping his voice low. "We can either stay and let them find us, or we expose everything." Jonathan's eyes widened, realization dawning. "You think?" Richard nodded gravely. "We find those files, and whatever the truth is, we bring it to the surface. No more hiding. No more secrets." Just then, the door above creaked open slightly, and Richard could barely see the silhouette of Derek peering down. The tension in the air became unbearable. It was now or never. "Move!" Richard hissed, adrenaline surging as they dashed silently to the wooden chest. They opened it hurriedly, the stench of dust and mold filling their lungs. Papers, photos, they were scattered across the top, a testament to his family's tangled legacy. Richard scrambled through them, heart racing with urgency, preparing to unearth the secrets hidden within. "Here!" Jonathan suddenly pointed, holding up a file stamped with "Confidential." Richard snatched it from his hands trembling, teeth grinding as he felt the weight of their fate resting upon its crumpled pages. "Let us go," Richard urged, looking for an exit. Just as they turned, the crushing sound of boots stomped into the cellar. "Get them!" Derek shouted through a wild rush of laughter. Richard's heart sank, but fear morphed into resolve as adrenaline surged. They sprinted out through a side exit, the cool air hitting them like a slap. The forest stretched ahead, dark and menacing, but safety felt closer at hand. "Over there!" Jonathan pointed, urgency flooding his voice. A path emerged, leading away from the chaos. They ran, hearts pounding, fueled by desperation. As they tore through the underbrush, Richard glanced back at the estate. The silhouette loomed behind him, but the determination surged forth, pushing them ahead. Each breath strengthened their resolve, each step bringing clarity. They emerged onto a dirt road, the sky beginning to bleed orange with the light of dawn. Richard's heart raced with a cacophony of thoughts. Had they truly escaped? No time to ponder that now. They had evidence to share, a truth ready to burst forth into the light. "Richard!" Jonathan shouted, pulling him from his thoughts. "We need to figure out how to get this to the police." "Right. The police," he echoed, scanning the darkening trees for any sign of danger. "They couldn't let what they found be buried like everything else." Driven only by the hope of justice and the desperate need for closure, Richard felt a weight lift. The past could no longer shackle him, and as they pushed forward together, their breaths spent, the first rays of the sun broke through the treetops, washing over them like a blessing. As they reached the road, Richard caught sight of a patrol car in the distance. Hope surged through his chest like a flame. With adrenaline-fueled urgency, they rushed to flag it down. The sinister threat of the night began to fade, and Richard finally felt clear-eyed amidst the chaos. The dawn was creeping in, drawing a line under the darkened hour. As the police officers leapt from their vehicle, eyes wide with alarm, Richard knew this would be the end of hiding and the beginning of a dangerous dig into the truth. "Help!" he shouted, breathless, as the officers approached. "We need to talk. There's something you need to see." Before Richard could finish, the silence of the past crashed around him, but the truth was finally ready to emerge. His heart thudded in his chest, not out of fear, but of liberation. The darkness behind him whispered secrets he was no longer ashamed to reveal. It was time to move forward, to own his narrative. Richard turned to Jonathan, gratitude swelling within him. "Thank you for everything. I couldn't have done this without you." Jonathan offered a small smile, relief shining through. "Let us get through this together." And as dawn broke bright over the horizon, clarity of purpose settled in his heart. Together they would unveil the horror that had haunted them for so long. Together they would emerge into the light. This was a new beginning, the first chapter in a world that had finally opened up. Now it was your turn to step up. You need to subscribe now so you don't miss the next exclusive stories. Smash that like button now to feed the algorithm and keep the fire alive. And flood the comments section with your reactions and theories about the ending. What did you think? Let's get that discussion going. Finally, instantly share this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion. Don't get left out. Spread the word and let us build this amazing community together. Don't wait even one more second. Your support makes all the difference.